everybody, in this video we're going to work on the item modal, and we're going to start with setting up what is necessary to make the modal open and close. And so here I've already created the component files. You can go ahead and do that and create the boilerplate here. And we'll want a div with the class name modal, that's for sure. And at the moment, I'm just going to do something similar to what I did with the item card components. And I'm just going to put the card name in there. Our goal is to make this card name appear and disappear when we click on the corresponding cards. So that's our goal. That's our first goal. You might want to try and give the whole thing a try now if you want. We have a bunch of rules here that should help you. Examples that you can use. Of course, you wouldn't call it login modal. These are just examples. But we give some pretty explicit instructions here, so I would recommend following them and seeing what you can do to get it to function. And then after it's functioning, we can work on the styling. So give it a try, then unpause the video. Okay, so you'll have two modal components. Both should be opened and closed in the same way by adding or removing a modifier class like you've done in the past. We've already done this, and that means we can reuse a lot of the styles. But the way we will handle the class updates will be very different, and that's what we're going to focus on now. We need to create a piece of state in app.js called ItemModal and initialize it to an empty string. So what that means is, close these, create a piece of state means do this. So we said ItemModal, then set ItemModal equals use state. Initialize it to an empty string means this. That will be its initial value. When this is an empty string, the modal will be invisible. It will be not visible. When it is some other string, a specific other string, not just any string, but a specific other string, that's when we will open the corresponding modal. So for the item modal, we might make the string be, say, item modal, and then we would have a handler fire when someone clicks the card image, and when that happens, it will set ItemModal to item modal, and we'll use that to tell us that it's time to open the item modal, this piece here. So for each modal, we'll just start with the one, assign a descriptive string to ItemModal. For example, if you had a login modal, which you don't, you would use something like this. So we'll use something very, very similar here. Create the handler, and yeah, all your handlers should be in app.jsx, and I'll call it item or item modal handle open item modal. And you see we're using the set active modal setter thing to set it to this value. What are we going to need to do with this set active with this handle open item modal function? We're going to need to pass it to the item card class. So to do that, the item card class isn't found in app.jsx. It's found in main. So we need to pass it through to the main prop and then through to item card. And so handle open item modal equals handle open item modal. And in main, there are always two parts to passing a prop. You have to destructure it here as a prop, handle open item modal, and then you do whatever you need to with it. Well, the two parts are passing it here and destructuring it here. And so we have destructured it. We now need to pass it along to the item card component. Often it gets renamed at the final destination to something like on card click, something, because that's what's happening. You use it when the card is clicked. Inside item card, we then need to set a click listener. And that is, we use the onClick property. And for now, I am just going to do this. Not on click, on card click. We destructure the prop, and then we use it on card click. This is not a prop per se, it's a property of the image element. So there we are. We can verify that we have this working like so. Actually, here, we'll verify it like this. I'm going to log ItemModal to the console. And what we should find is that, yes, something will log here, although it's not going to be this string value. Let's give it a try. I'll explain why that is in a moment. Click. Go to here. Click. Let me refresh. Yeah, so you see the first time I clicked, it's empty. But it is logging something. And the reason for that is state setting is asynchronous. You usually do not have to worry about that, but because usually what you're doing when you're setting state is you're just doing it to trigger something else to happen, and that will happen asynchronously under the hood. But if you're trying to log something to the console immediately after setting it, that won't work. So it's working so far. We are setting this correctly. How to make the ItemModal component open when we click. Well, first we're going to need to import it, right? We're not going to be able to do anything until it's actually present on the page. So here it is. Now at this point we should actually see that name because we're not doing anything to hide it. If we go, no, we shouldn't, because we'll get an error. Can't read properties of undefined reading name. You've probably seen this error before, right? And it tells us pretty clearly that card is undefined. And of course it's undefined. We're not passing any prop. And it's just like function arguments. If you do not pass a function argument, the parameter will be undefined. That's how it works. And this is the same idea. So we need to pass a card property. And if we just did something like this, like if we stuck a piece of an object literal there with a name property, we should see it now. It'll be all the way down here. This is what's printing. Okay, so but we don't want to just do an object literal. We want the name of the card that we're clicking to appear. For now, it can just appear down there. and we want it to be invisible to begin with. So those are the two next things that we want to do. And the way to do this, so first, how do we make ItemModal invisible to begin with? Well, we can use basically the same thing we did in our previous project. Remember how we had these modal styles here that made it invisible to begin with and made it visible when it was clicked. We needed some JavaScript to go along with it, but we can just copy all of the styles that you have for that and add them to your ItemModal CSS file. Of course, we're going to want not that same font family. I believe it is font weight 700 that we want. Possibly this would need to be changed. I'm not sure. All the rest of this is just pretty typical stuff we can just keep. And so what I would expect now is it's going to be invisible because the modal class is now hidden. Yes, it's invisible. To make it visible, we would need to apply modal is opened. We can't just do it like that because then it'll always be visible. We need to apply it when the card is clicked. So how do we do that? Well, there's a couple potential ways that we could do it, but the way that I would do it is to, well, you need a prop. Pretty much any way you do it is going to require a prop of some sort. I'll call this prop is open. And is open should be true when we want the thing to be visible, false when we don't want it to be visible. So we can start by just implementing it in here. We need to add modal is open to this class list when is open is true. We can do that easily without having any idea of what we're actually passing to is open. So we can just ignore that for now and just focus on this. So give that a try if you haven't figured it out already, and then I'll show you how. So there are definitely any number of ways that you could do this, but the typical way in React is to use a template literal, so a string in these backticks. This is the class that we always want, so it just goes in the string. Then we use the $ curly braces syntax, and we can use a ternary operator or the ampersand operator. And I'll show you the difference between them. So here, using the ampersand, is opened and modal is opened. Now the syntax here, it's rather particular. You need curly braces, and the curly braces inside them need to have the backticks. Then inside the backticks is where your string goes. And then in here, there's some more somewhat complicated nesting that you need to get perfect, or else it's not going to work. Let's take a look at what this results in the browser. What we can do is go to the Elements panel. It's going to be invisible, so we need to go here to dig it up. So here, we're getting modal and undefined. I was expecting false, but in any case, this undefined, getting this undefined can be resolved. It's not necessarily a problem. But the reason for it is that when this expression is false, I was expecting it to return false. I don't know why it's returning undefined. That surprised me. But if you use a ternary operator, you can tell it what to return when the condition is false. And you can tell it to return an empty string. So we go back here and we have just modal in the class list. We could even, if we wanted to, ensure that the space is only visible, but that doesn't really matter. So great, it's invisible. Now we need to figure out how to make it visible. Well, there's one thing that you need to do to make it visible. You need to pass something that is true to is opened as the is open prop. So then here, where are we? App.jsx is open. So like for instance, if we were to just pass literally true, then it would appear. There we are. You can see the text right there. But we need something, a condition that's going to be true when we want it to be true. What is that condition going to be? Try to think about it. There's something that we have already done in this file. We already have code that's doing it that will uniquely tell us when we want to have the item modal opened. We want to have the item modal opened when active modal is the string. So all we got to do is check, is active modal item modal? Oops. If this is true, then it's going to open our modal. So now if we click here, it opens. Look at that. Right. Well, so that's good. But we don't want it to just display ASDF. We want it to display the actual name of the card that was clicked on. So to do that, we need to do some more stuff in this handler. Because when the card gets clicked, remember this gets called when the card gets clicked. We need to do more than just set the active modal. We need to make the card's data available for this item modal. And the way we would do that would be, let's see how we describe it here. So we've already done this stuff. We've done this stuff. This is the close handler. This is general opening and closing of the modals, which we're mostly done with. Although we didn't set up the closing yet. Item modal component, create a handler function and a selected card state variable in app.jsx. The handler needs to make the item modal visible. Already doing that, right? We are already doing that. This should say see the previous section. And assign the card that was clicked to the selected card variable. So this is the part that we need to do. Already did that. Then we'll pass selected card to item modal. So this is what we need to do for the next step, is create the selected card state, assign the card that was clicked on to the selected card variable in the handler that we've already created, and then pass that selected card to item modal. So give it a try if you haven't figured this out already, and then unpause the video. Okay, so first we create the state. Empty string is not appropriate here. We should make it an object or null. I'll just go with an empty object. We need to set the selected card in this function, right? But what do we set it to? We don't have the card available to us in this file. I mean, we have the clothing items, but we don't know which card. But we do know which card where we're in our item card class, in our item card component. When an image gets clicked, we know that this is the card data that we need to set here. And conveniently, we're calling this function. Well, we're using it as an event handler. What we need to do is have this function accept an argument, and that argument needs to be this card data here. And then we can set the selected card. There's a trick, because if we, well, let's move on to the next piece. So the next piece is passing the selected card to the modal. Oops. Yeah. Pass selected card instead of this this thing, the object literal. Then the name of the card should be displayed because we're already displaying card.name. But it's not going to work. So let's see. Click. It opens, but there's nothing there. It's because card.name is undefined. We don't get an error because it's not card being undefined. It's card.name that is undefined, and an undefined object property does not produce an error. So if you to figure out what the issue is, try to think back to how event handlers work, and it's just like with add event listener. The handler function always receives as its first argument the event object. So if you were to log this thing that I'm calling card here to the console, you would find that it was the event object. It's not the card. It's not the data object. But we need it to be. And so the way to do it is anytime you need to pass arguments to a function, to a handler function, you need to do something like this. Wrap it in an anonymous function and pass it the argument you want. And that's it. Easy. At one point in time, there were performance issues surrounding using an anonymous function in this way. I'm not sure if there still are, but still, it's often a better practice to not inline things. So handle open card. So what you could do is declare a separate variable, a separate function, just like so. And if you needed to access the event handler, you could always do so, but we don't have any need for that right here. Now if we do this, what we should see is, yep, you see it says cap. It says coat. So the functionality is in place. It just remains to do some styling. Regarding the styling, it's, well, I would definitely, again, really suggest trying to do this all on your own, because I think that all of the styling is definitely stuff that you have, well, that's not the element I'm pointing at. All of the styling is stuff that you have you have seen before and even done before. It's a little different than the previous project, right? In its layout and all of that. But like there's two text elements down here, but really it's very, very similar. So give it a try. But if you are still struggling, you can watch the rest of this video and I'll put most of it together. Okay, so we need an image, a close button, a container to wrap all this stuff, another container, because I'm going to want to put these two things inside a box, and then these two things is what we need. So, HTML. We need a div, close button, and you should be using the same classes that you used before would be my recommendation. Because really you could reuse a lot of the styles if you wanted, and there's no reason to differ them. You know, we don't need anything inside there. Well, no, I'll just put an X in here because I don't want to deal with the images. You have done that before. You can manage. We need an image. The image is just going to be card.link, right? That's going to be the image source. Same as we're doing here. You know, of course it's called something different, but it's the same data. And like I said, I want a container to contain those two text elements. It's at the foot of the modal, so I'll call it modal footer. I guess an H2 would be okay for the title. I'm going to give both of these the modal text class, even though they're different text elements, because I believe they're going to have the same styles. So this is the card's name. And this is the card's weather, which we haven't used before, but it's a property that we'll use a lot more in the next sprint when we start interacting with the weather API. Okay, let's take a look. Well, look at that. All the stuff is appearing. In terms of styling, let's try and get it in the right shape. And so what does that mean? Well, everything's in one column, but this is pulled out of the flow and pinned here, 24 pixels from the top and from the right. Refer to your previous implementation of, well, I mean, you could look at the cards with the delete button up in the top corner. I think one of the modals, maybe the item modal from the previous project was like this. You just need to use absolute positioning with a top value and a right value. But as we have seen time and time again, to make that work, we need to give relative positioning to the parent. So like so. Relative positioning, then absolute top 24, right 24 pixels. I'm just going to put a reminder here. Get the actual image. Well, I mean, that looks an awful lot closer right now, right? What about the border radius? We didn't do it for this element. Let's do it for here. What would we apply border radius to? if you look here, it's going all around the outermost corners, so we should apply it to that that element, the outermost element, which is going to be this modal container element. I'll just do 8 pixels. Well, let's take a look. What is it? Click around. There we go. 16 pixels. It's not working. Why is it not working? Well, that would be because we need to hide the overflow. A kind of odd thing where if you give border radius to a parent element, its children will overflow those curved borders, and you need to hide that overflow to be able to see the curved borders. And to verify that this is working down here, we would need to actually apply the background color to the modal footer element, like so. Now, this is interesting. Try to figure out what's going on here. There is actually, I think there's one thing that you need to do that will both get rid of this gap and will ensure that the bottom borders at corners are rounded. So try and figure that out. And a hint would be use the element inspector. All right, so as I said, use the element inspector. And if we just inspect these elements, what we can see is that the gap is mostly caused by margin. And there's also this margin on the bottom that's extending below here. I wonder if that will fix the border radius issue. The answer is yes, it will. So what did we need to, the margin? We need to just remove this margin from the modal text element. And there we are. That's pretty good. Of course, we need some padding. There's also this little space here that you may have forgotten where that comes from. That's because images are inline block, and inline elements, including inline block elements, always have a little bit of space that comes after them. In the case of an image, it comes below them. Typically, we just get rid of this by setting, by changing the image to a block element. So and all right, so I would say that is, there are some details that you need to address, but it's pretty decent. We don't have closing set. So I'm going to actually leave this as a to-do for you. You've already got some of the infrastructure in place already. Like, to open the modal, what do? We set active modal to item modal. To close it, what do you think we do? Well, set it back to an empty string. That'll close any modal that happens to be open. So what you'll need to do is make the modals, it'll work for all modals, close. And to do this, what would you do? You would need to create a handler function. Pass the handler to the modals. The handler function needs to set active modal to empty string. You pass the handler to the modals and set up click listener on the buttons. Click listener. That's actually it. I think it's just those two steps is what you would need to do here, because most of most of it is already set up. Okay, that is everything. Next video we will work on the other modal component.